of Temple of Epiphany.
Right. The blue-white-red splash certainly has provided other options for the deck. What Gans has done here is he's actually running 2 Keranos, no Aetherling in his main deck.
Yeah, his win condition, he has 2 copies of Keranos and Assemble the Legion and 3 copies of Elspeth. But yeah, as you mentioned, no copies of Aetherling.
Yeah, interestingly enough, to make room for all these finishers, he has cut down on Sphinx's Revelation in the deck.
And this is more of a board control deck. I mean, he's got a bunch of detention spheres, a bunch of banishing lights. Red gives him access to some spot removal, so it's not the pure control, you know, Elixir Immortality style control decks we've seen Blue, White, and Esper incorporate. It's a little more proactive, and it plays Keranos to the board as well.
All right, well, our match is underway. Gans was on the place. We started off on Temple of Epiphany, followed up with a pair of Shocklands. No plays yet on his side, just mana open. Boswell made a turn to Scavenging Ooze, which is now swinging to try to get the first points of damage in on Gans. And it's going to meet an Azorius Charm. Now, that's something we haven't necessarily seen out of the Tricolor Revelation decks today.
Yeah, the player we had on camera earlier playing against Jared Betcher was playing 0 copies of Azorius Charm. Jake with the full 4. And all Jake's really trying to do with this list, it feels like to me at least, is just keep his opponent off long enough to stick Keranos or Assemble the Legion. And in that sort of game plan, Azorius Charm is really powerful. And in this game, it's going to be awesome. I mean, he's setting Andrew's development back so far. And Scavenging is probably not going to be a great draw for Andrew next turn, given the way the game's shaping up. So Azorius Charm is still quite powerful.
Yeah, so Boswell is able to get another creature back onto the board. That's going to be Experiment 1. And does not have another creature to play to evolve it. So that Azorius Charm, as you said, really setting Boswell back.
Although this could still represent Selesnya Charm. So Andrew still could potentially add to his board here.
Yeah, Selesnya Charm or no, though, Gans has the answer to both. This is going to be Jace Architect of Thought. He casts it and pluses it to 5. No charm. And you have to think that this is a difficult position for Boswell.
The game couldn't have started any better for Jake here. You know, Andrew, again, effectively no board or very close to it, facing down Jace at 5.
Yeah, it does provide an opening for Boswell to resolve one of his spells here. He's going to play a Temple of Plenty. It looks like he does have the option for a Johnny, Caller of the Pride, to resolve here. You know, it's kind of what's the best thing he wants to get down with this window.
Yeah, Ajani's not great this turn, but it may be better to have over the course of subsequent turns.
Yeah, I think among his other options are he has Boon Satyr he could make this turn. He's going to go ahead, though, and get the Planeswalker down. And swing for 1. That's going to put Jace down to 4.
Yeah, there's an option there for Andrew to play Boon Satyr, but he has to respect the possibility of just Supreme Verdict next turn. So if he can advance his board without folding to a Supreme Verdict here, that's not a bad line for him to take.
Yeah, the danger is that even if there's not a Supreme Verdict, Jake could go ahead and find a Supreme Verdict. You know, there's enough leeway that Jace gets to -2 this turn. So we see Jace does just that. Syncopate, Detention Sphere, Temple of Enlightenment.
This is a tough split. I mean, the Detention Sphere is the most obviously powerful card here, but giving a counterspell and a Temple here is quite powerful for Jake as well.
Yeah, without knowing the texture of Jake's hand, it's really hard to split it. I'm pretty sure that Jake is going to have to take whatever pile has the land in it right now. He's a little short on lands. That said, when a control deck's ahead, they oftentimes just take the pile with 2 cards in this situation.
A lot of the cards are interchangeable. You know, a counterspell and a removal spell can be quite similar in a lot of spots. So I think the fact that Jake needs the land and that it's a temple, no less, is the tiebreaker here.
What'll be interesting to me is this might be our first time to see just how powerful Keranos is in this style strategy. We've seen a lot of blue, white, red control decks today that are running 1 to 2 Keranos, but I don't believe we've seen one on the battlefield yet.
We saw it in the match that Jared Betcher played where his opponent tapped out for Keranos and then died the following turn.
Okay.
So that's
We've
our
seen
first time.
it. It's been on the battlefield. We haven't seen it in action.
It has briefly hung out. It wasn't even alive. You know, devotion count was there, so it was just a spectator as his controller was killed.
It showed up to watch him lose the game.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what can Boswell mount here? He gets a 5th land. It's another Mana Confluence. And he's going to pump Experiment 1. And try to take down Jace. That's not going to happen, though. And Azorius Charm makes work of that.
Wow, was Azorius Charm good?
When Azorius Charm's good, it's really good.
It gets lost in the shuffle quite often, but so far it's been incredible.
All right, and there's that Scavenging Ooze that was charmed not so long ago. We see a 3rd Azorius Charm hanging out in Gans's hand. along with that Keranos, just all the time in the world, it seems, for the control player.
The kind of position that Jake wants to be in here, just being able to take his time. He can try to land Keranos this turn, maybe draw some cards with Jace or plus again.
This is one of those, if when you're playing a full day of control, this is one of those rare relaxing games that you get. Where you're just like, oh, you're never really worried about your opponent killing you. You're kind of just always have more cards.
Well, this is the big turn here for Jake. If he's able to get out of this without too much damage getting done, he should be able to ride Keranos to victory. But if Andrew's able to cobble together a huge attack here, Jake might be back on the defensive.
Yeah, Jace plussed. Jake tapped out for Keranos. There was a Boon Satyr on end step, so if Boswell desires it, the Jace is going to get knocked off the battlefield.
And I had to assume that's step one here for Andrew.
Yeah. All his creatures are within range of Keranos, however. Temple of Plenty for Boswell. And put a counter on Ooze with the Ajani. You see now just 2 cards remaining, and we know one of them actually is Experiment 1 at the moment, so not much action left in Boswell's hand.
So this is a start to a very good turn here for Andrew, taking down the Jason, getting in some damage.
And
oh my.
Wow, okay, and then Banishing Light for the Keranos. So the spot that Jake had worked toward of little effect there, as Andrew's able to take care of all of it.
Yeah. The Keranos on a stable board looked like a fine recipe, but then the board suddenly became a lot less stable than it appeared initially.
And I think, so from a control standpoint, this is one of the reasons why I guess I'd say I still remain unconvinced about Keranos. I don't know how much, by tapping out for 5 there, by tapping out there, he kind of let Boswell back in the game. Like, even with the Keranos in hand, I'd almost be tempted to just sit back behind that Syncopate and do nothing.
Well, there's nothing saying that he couldn't have run that play if he was feeling so inclined.
Right, that's what I mean. But it's like, if every time you're in the I'm really far ahead position and you still don't want to tap out for your win con, the question is, do you want to be playing this win con?
Well, in the face of Ajani, it's hard to say how very far ahead he is on that board. Ajani threatens quite a bit of different action. Kind of.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, as long as he keeps the Supreme Verdicts, he actually can just let Ajani tick up indefinitely. He doesn't have, sure, it can make an army of cats, but he can just sweep those away.
Yeah. So flying in double strike here for a lot of damage.
Yeah, that's going to go ahead and press huge damage. That's going to push 11 damage in on Gans, and he's down to 10 life after that rev for 3. But he is going to get to untap with a full grip and 8 untapped lands. But he has some things to take care of. A Boon Satyr, a Scavenging Ooze, and a Ajani Collar of the Pride. He's going to start with Supreme Verdicts. That takes care of the 2 creatures. Detention Sphere takes care of Ajani. He opted to sphere the Ajani as opposed to sphering the Banishing Light.
Well, I think he still has to have respect here for the possibility of another Banishing Light or a Boon Satyr. So just take the more conservative route here. Jake has an Elspeth in hand, so he doesn't have to get too fancy here. He just has to have himself not get killed.
All right, and Boswell commits the rest of his hand, which is going to be Experiment 1 into Soldier of the Pantheon, into Luxodon Smiter, making the Experiment 1 a 3/3. So now, with 9 mana in play, and a hand of 3 cards, can Gans stabilize?
Elspeth's a great start.
Elspeth's a great start. I mean, it's all the chump blockers he could want. For 3 creatures, 3 attackers, 3 blockers a turn. So he's already stopped Boswell from being able to deal damage.
And there's a Mutavault here also to help break serve or block or what have you. So pretty stable board here. Cutting off a lot of Andrew's outs here, looking at really needing something like another Ajani to maybe try to push through the last couple points.
Yeah, and if you look at the hand that Gans has, it's no slouch either. He has a Syncopate in hand, along with a Jace Architect of Thought and an Azorius Charm.
Mm-hmm.
So the swing is the 3/3 and the 4/4 here from Boswell, and once again, Azorius Charm is going to be huge.
Now, keep in mind, Selesnya Charm does give trample, so these blocks are a little more complicated for Jake than they would appear on the surface.
Yeah, he probably wanted to double block that Smiter just so that he doesn't lose the Elspeth. He only opted a single block, but there was no Selesnya Charm, so Elspeth does get to live. And now the Planeswalker team is becoming assembled. Jace, Architect of Thought, is going to join Elspeth on the battlefield. And he's going to draw into more cards. We see Is It Charm, Mutavault, and Assemble the Legion.
It seems like a good, not a bad opportunity here for Jake to take Assemble and try to stick that alongside his Elspeth.
So is that greedy? I mean, in the situation, I would want to take the Is It Charm land because there's 2 cards in it.
Sure. Well,
okay.
Andrew's had enough, and in either case, he's had enough. And we're going on to the sideboard.
So game 1 does go to Gans. A game he was firmly controlled. There was a moment there where it looked like Boswell might be able to sneak into the game. Gans was able to turn around and close that door.
Yeah. That Keranos, that was a risky turn, and Andrew was almost able to capitalize on it and steal the game, but eventually Revelation into Supreme Verdict Detention Sphere was just too much for Andrew to overcome.
All right, so we'll go over to the sideboard, starting first with Andrew Boswell's deck. We've seen this before. He's going to have a fair amount of cards in green-white that really can become problematic for a blue control deck. Looking at that, he can board into more Boon Satyrs. He's playing 3 Advent of the Worm out of the sideboard, so you can have first of all, a lot of flash to the deck, which is difficult for blue-white-red to control. He also hits cards like Glare of Heresy and Banishing Light to help take out cards like Elspeth and Detention Sphere that Jake plays.
Yeah, being able to fight over the Detention Sphere and Banishing Light aspect of Jake's deck is very powerful here for Andrew, because he's going to have some really powerful threats, especially as Johnny, that are going to be pinned down under those spheres. Being able to break those up is really potent.
All right. On Gans' side, however,
you got a Dispel, 2 Gainsays, a Magma Spray, a Turn Burn, a Wear Tear, a Deicide, 2 copies of Anger of the Gods, an Archangel of Thune, Jace Memory Adept, 2 Reprisal, and 2 Bramaz, King of Oreskos. I think he's going to want to become more of a proactive deck in these games, sit on his heels a little bit less. I think the 1 Magma Spray and the Turn Burn are both excellent. Magma Spray being a great answer to early beaters and especially Voice of Resurgence. Turn Burn, just very flexible. The 2 copies of Anger of the Gods here, Andrew, with a lot of 2 and 3 timeless creatures. I think the 2 copies of Bramaz and the Archangel are going to come in as well. Bramaz very well suited for this kind of game, especially supplemented by Anger of the Gods, and he can be way less of a counterspell deck and more of a proactive removal and good threat deck.
Yeah, at this time he can use his removal and his cards like Bramaz just to bridge the gap toward his late game finishers. These finishers being cards like Keranos, cards like Assemble the Legion, and most importantly, cards like Sphinx's Revelation.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what kind of win conditions he's going to leave in his deck now, having seen Banishing Light out of Andrew's list. I think Keranos may not be long for this world after game 1. It's hard, you don't want to read in too much into one random game, but it looked like if there was going to be a spot where that card was going to be good, it was going to be there, and then it wasn't.
Yeah, so I am still not positive what boards Keranos is great on right now. So, I mean, it just seems like, so the 3 damage, I agree that it comes out in this matchup because, like, there seems to be too many creatures in Boswell's deck that actually could survive 3 damage. I would like it as a finisher maybe against an aggro deck where throwing a lightning bolt every turn is just the best.
It wouldn't surprise me if Keranos was the best win condition available if you wanted to try to beat mono black. They can't really get it off the table. A lot of their cards don't work anymore once it's in play. Yeah. And with the green splash, even Assemble the Legion isn't the haymaker it used to be because Golgari Charm is a threat in the post-board games.
That actually makes sense. Okay, so Gods are a card that black just can't get rid of.
Yeah, they really struggle. I mean, of course it can be Thoughtseize, but it can't even be Duressed, which is true of a lot of your other potential win conditions. Again, like Assemble Legion, like Elspeth. So it's durable. They can't really get off the board once it's in play, and it can easily win the game by itself.
They can Lifebane. No, they actually can't even Lifebane Zombie Keranos. Oh, wow. I was going to say with some of the gods they can Lifebane them, but that's true. It's really just Thoughtseize that answers it.
Yeah.
All right, you're starting to sell me on the card. That is good. The fact mono black does have a hard time with it.
Now, maybe it's still better to have your 2 copies in the sideboard. That could still be the case, but that seems like a matchup where Keranos is very well suited.
All right, well, we will see whether he decides to keep them in. We're on game 2. Boswell will be on the play this time. And this is round 10 of 10 here at our Standard Open in Somerset, New Jersey. Matthias Hunt joined by Patrick Sullivan.
Chris Bakula throwing some shout outs Andrew Boswell's way.
Andrew, another local player, I assume?
I don't actually know Andrew myself, but I mean, he's here, and if Chris knows him, then there's a good chance.
Absolutely. One thing I want to ask about Boswell's deck. So he's on 3 Ajani Caller of the Pride. Ajani Mentor of Heroes is from the new set. He's played 1 out of the board, but otherwise we don't really see any of that in his deck. And I'm assuming that's just a function of its mana cost.
For sure. I mean, Andrew's not even playing Advent of the Worm in the main deck. I think game 1, he's trying to be as linear as possible, and then in the post-board games where he can anticipate more Doom Blades, more removal spells, more sweepers, he wants access to high-impact individual cards like Advent of the Worm, but his game 1 plan isn't about that at all.
All right. And we are underway right now. Players deciding on mulligans here. Looking at Gans' hand, yeah, it once again has a double Azorius Charm in it. He's going to have to ship it. Not enough lands to go with the charms.
Yeah, that was a 1-lander right there.
But Azorius Charm doing some really, really solid work game 1.
It was critical. There was a lot of other important parts of the match, and it's really easy to get hung up on the revelation into Supreme Verdict Detention Sphere turn, as that was the swingiest thing. But the early rush was stemmed off by Azorius Charm, and arguably they were better than removal spells would have even been, because the threats he was putting back on top of Andrew's deck were probably worse than a draw step in most circumstances.
Right, that's one of the really strong advantages of Azorius Charm, especially when you Azorius Charm a 1-drop, is, you know, most 1-drops are not very good to draw on turn 3, and when your opponent plays a 1-drop and you charm it, then they get it again on the 3rd turn.
When my opponent Azorius Charms a Rakdos Cackler, I just think, I wish that was the last breath. I wish they had just cast something to kill that thing.
Yeah, you have to have it again. Great.
Yeah.
That is one of the advantages to cards like the Bestow 1-drop, however. That's a card you probably don't mind drawing again.
Yeah, exactly. And haste creatures are pretty good against Azorius Charm. There's some threats, but the random 1-drop with not that much utility is really poorly suited to fighting that card.
The best one is when your opponent attacks with something like an Elvish Mystic, and then you Azorius Charm that.
Yeah.
That's probably the worst feelings. Oh, turn 3, I get to draw this mana elf. And we'll see again. Gans kept on 6 cards, does still have a copy of Azorius Charm in his hand. He has a pair of Turn Burns and Azorius Charm, a Sphinx's Rev, a pair of lands.
So much more of a removal deck here.
Yeah, he's probably just going to be looking for lands with his first few draws. Even though he has 3, he would love to just continue to hit lands. He should have answers to most of Boswell's early threats.
This is a hand that's very well suited to set up the game to cast Sphinx's Revelation.
Yeah. Azorius Charm and Turn Burn can take care of an early for the first drop, perhaps. Azorius Charm takes care of any other drop. Eventually, a Fused Turn Burn takes care of anything. But Boswell has a great answer in for that, and that's in a turn 2 Voice of Resurgence.
This is where one of the sideboarded Magma Sprays would be quite good.
Yeah. Gans decides he does not have the time. He's going to go ahead and shock down to 18 so that he can burn the Experiment 1 before it becomes a 3/3.
Voice of Resurgence, a really problematic card for Jake in this matchup. He does have 2 copies of Anger of the Gods. He has the Magma Spray we discussed, and if he sideboards into his creatures, you know, Burmaz and Archangel of Thune are very good here as well, but a lot of his conventional reactive cards are not nearly as good in the face of Voice of Resurgence.
Yeah, Azorius Charm in particular is a card that lines up poorly to Voice of Resurgence.
Yeah, I think that's going to be draw a card pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, if he has time to do that, depending on how much pressure Boswell puts down, you know, sometimes when you're playing control, you actually just have to Azorius Charm a creature into the Voice the turn just to hope to Supreme Verdict it the next turn.
That is some desperate times.
It's not what you want to be doing with the card. If you already have the Verdict, it's fine, though. It's just a really big tell that you have the Verdict. Or that things are going really poorly if your opponent does that.
So Loxodon Smiter here is a great play from Andrew, as it means that Anger of the Gods is no longer a big blowout. He has Instance and Supreme Verdict covered a little bit with Voice of Resurgence, and now he has a sweeper cover with Loxodon Smiter.
And we do see another turn burn in Gans's hand. He could burn the Voice of Resurgence if he's found a sweeper of, you know, say a Supreme Verdict here. And that's he's going to start out by burning the Voice.
Gotta start somewhere, and not a lot else to do that turn.
At the very least, this means he can Azorius Charm something next turn, like the Voice token, perhaps.
Yeah, as bad as things are looking for Jake here, if he's able to fend off for just 2 more turns, he might be able to Revelate for a fair pit and get over that hump.
He'd like to get to 6 lands before he casts the Revelation. I mean, to do that, he's going to have to survive till there. He's going down to at most 8 life this turn. Perhaps he's going down even farther.
I would be really surprised if Andrew added any more threats to his board this turn. I mean, he does have Advent in his hand, so it's possible he's happy if he gets hit with the Supreme Verdict, but it's all about pacing his threats from here.
Yeah. And he's going to go ahead and make one more. That's Soldier of the Pantheon, and swing for 7. That puts Gans down to 7. And I do like how that changes it into a 2-turn clock.
Yeah, there is a lot to be said for that. And again, Andrew's still leaving Advent in his hand, which is great insurance against the sweeper.
Right. You see, it looks like Archangel of Thune in Gans' hand.
So yeah, Gans has gone into full board control mode here. He's just trying to, he's sideboarded in such a way to just try to keep the board stable to allow for one of his creatures to finish things off.
Voice of Resurgence cast pre-combat for Boswell, so this is one of those scenarios where they cast an Azorius Charm, and either means they're going to verdict you or that things have gone horribly, horribly wrong, and this is one of the second ones. The only way Gans can stay alive is by casting that Azorius Charm, and not even going to do it.
Doesn't want any more of this. Going on to game 3, and that was the green-white game plan executed perfectly there against a control deck of get some annoying threats, Voice of Resurgence playing a critical role, get out in front and just not dump out your entire hand on the table, but measure your threats in such a way where you're applying pressure, playing around some of the sweepers, some of the spot removal cards, and leaving enough gas left over where you can beat a sweeper.
Yeah.
It's going to be harder for Andrew to execute that on the draw, of course, but that's the script.
All right, yeah, so we're going to game 3 here. Yeah, that was Boswell on the play. Gans was on a mulligan. To be fair, his hand was the kind of hand he would keep on 7 cards too. It's not like he ever had a lack of a spell to tap out for.
Yeah, he had lands, removal spells, and Sphinx's Revelation. For a 6-card hand, you could do a lot worse.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like he died with a bunch of Elspeths and Karanoses in his hand. He just couldn't quite deploy his cards in the right order or in time to beat what Andrew was doing.
Didn't miss a land drop. You know,
Yeah,
things are pretty functional.
Yeah, he played a game of Magic there, but Andrew's mixture of cards was just too much. So I'm really interested to see if Jake has brought in Burmaz here. I understand it doesn't line up the best against Loxodon Smiter, but it still feels like the upside is huge.
I like Burmaz in this matchup. I wasn't as sold on the Archangel of Thune there. It seems like it's very easy for Boswell to create board states that force Gans to Supreme Verdict. There's creatures that, are just efficient enough to say, even if Gans had resolved the Archangel there, I feel like he wouldn't have been able to attack with it. He would have had to, he could attack with it, and I almost think that Boswell could have raced it.
Well, given Voice of Resurgence and, you can imagine Advent of the Worm is involved in all of this as well, I feel like the counter spells in Jake's deck get so bad post-board. Andrew has a lot of ways to make those cards look silly, and if you need to jettison a lot of your counter spells, then you had to bring in something, and I feel like playing more to the board is a better plan for Jake in this matchup.
Yeah, he only actually has 3 counter spells in his deck to side out. If you count Is It Charm as a shock, he only has 3. He was only playing 3 counter spells. The Azorius Charms can be very awkward. I think their upside is too high to board them out.
Yeah, and their floor is also 2-mana draw card. It's not the end of the world.
Right, it's not Syncopate against a Voice of Resurgence, which becomes really bad. We see both players keeping 7. This time Jake has a different texture of a hand. He has Magma Spray and Supreme Verdict both available to him.
Magma Spray, again, 1 copy in his sideboard. I'm not sure if his hand has red mana currently, but the Supreme Verdict at least is a very potent tool for him to work with.
Temple of Enlightenment and followed by Hallowed Fountain for Gans. Boswell will start aggro, though, with Soldier of the Pantheon. And he's going to follow it up with, once again, Voice of Resurgence.
There it is. Now, Jake is much more equipped to beat this card this game than he was the previous game with Magma Spray and Detention Sphere, but
yeah.
Without red mana, a lot of his hands just shut off.
His Spray, Detention Sphere, he's opted for Banishing Light on this Voice of Resurgence, so he has a lot of removal here. We see Supreme Verdict, Magma Spray, Detention Sphere, and Jace Architect of Thought in Jake's hand.
4th land is going to be critical next turn, and ideally it's something that generates red mana as well.
But Voice will join the party again. Boswell, Glare of Heresies away the Banishing Light to rescue his Voice of Resurgence, continues the attacks, and Gans is down to 16.
And again, this is that Selesnya game plan of just trying to annoy you to death. I'm sure last turn, Jake is not thrilled with that turn that he took there. The Banishing Light getting blown up, and now Voice of Resurgence is back online. I had to use another removal spell on this thing. All the while I'm getting hit by Soldier of the Pantheon.
Big miss for Gans on that last turn. So he ended up Detention Spring a Voice of Resurgence, but that's because he missed his 4th land drop. His opponent's board was only a pair of 2-power creatures. If he had the 4th land, he could have made Jace Architect of Thought there, then followed up next turn with a Supreme Verdict. It would have been a great board state for him. Right now, things are more difficult because of how that played out.
Yeah. So it looks like Jake has drawn Steam Vents this turn, so that does unlock a lot of his hand. And now he's going to make the decision between Supreme Verdict and Jace and plussing it.
Yeah. The danger of Verdict is that he doesn't know how big the Voice token is going to get. So he's going to start on Jace. Jace pluses. It's unlikely that Boswell will be able to kill Jace this turn.
Probably involves Selesnya Charm, which there's a good chance that's not in Andrew's deck anymore.
Right. And this is still where Jace is great, against armies of small creatures.
Yeah. It might compel Andrew to play further into the Supreme Verdict, too.
And remember, Jake wasn't the only one stuck on 3 lands. Boswell also is stuck on 3 lands right now.
Well, it's a lot different for one of these players than the other, being stuck on 3.
Yeah. The 4th land is pretty important for Boswell. If he has cards like Advent of the Worm in his hand, being able to end-step Advent is really important against a card like Jace. Mm-hmm. So I think without the 4th land, Jace is a difficult card for the Greenwood aggro deck to answer. Everything goes at Jace, knocks him down to 2 loyalty. Andrew can commit more things to the board, but I don't think he's pretty excited. He doesn't really want to commit more things. He also doesn't want to pass into this Jace.
Yeah.
It's like Supreme Verdict blows out both lines.
This is rock and a hard place territory.
He basically just has to hope Gans doesn't have the Verdict, but as we know, he does.
And the fact that Gans thought so long last turn before deploying Jace, which is excellent on this board, I think if you buy into the body language at all, it's a pretty loud indicator that he does have Supreme Verdict as well.
And then one question will be whether or not he even wants to Verdict. He has the option to just Magma Spray the Voice and plus Jace. Yeah, he can Magma Spray Voice, plus Jace, Azorius Charm Dryad Militant. Mm-hmm. The best Supreme Verdict is the one you don't even have to cast.
Yeah, you can squeeze a little bit more here.
Yeah, plus is Jace, and he's going to pass back. And if Boswell doesn't hit the land, this Azorius Charm is going to be back-breaking. It looks like he has a land here. He has Temple Garden.
Yeah, then Andrew gets in the spot where he's only treading water against Jace, not doing anything forward, and every land drop that Jake makes gets him closer and closer to a large Revelations.
Jace down to 1. No, not even a thought there about Azorius Charm.
No. I think Jake is way more interested in land drops at this point.
So he's just going to draw a card with Azorius Charm.
Yeah.
And 3 mana from Boswell. He's going to go for another spell here. This is Luxodon Smiter and a Temple Garden. Jake doesn't even cycle the charm. It's going to just looks like he's building up toward a Supreme Verdict board, and that's what it'll be.
And I suppose really no big rush for him to use that Azorius Charm, as it gives him a lot of insurance against Advent of the Worm, which at this point may be the card he's really the only card he's concerned about.
Yeah, charming an attacker is just as good, every bit as good as drawing a card on this sort of board. You see Andrew with 4 cards remaining, he reloads once. He only has 1 reload. That's his whole hand. He's going to go Experiment 1 into Soldier of the Pantheon, into Smiter. Drops 9 power on the board, but that's everything he's got.
Yeah, we saw this play from Andrew last game as well. Oh, and there's the Supreme Verdict on the top. We saw this play from Andrew last time where he treaded water for as long as he possibly could against this Supreme Verdict, and then ultimately said, all right, you've played the first one. I can't measure my threats against the second one. Here's my wave of stuff.
And the body language there by Gans, just showing that he top decks the Supreme Verdict as well. And that's got to just be such a tough feeling.
I mean,
yeah.
it's in his deck to draw, right? He's playing
Right. He's playing them for a reason.
he's playing the maximum amount that the DCI will allow. So, you know, what are you going to do? And he gets a lot of looks with it at Jace too if he was feeling so inclined.
All right.
But yeah, that's not great if you're Andrew.
Is It Charm takes care of experiment one. Boswell side of the board clear of creatures. Jake's board still with a Jace in play. And he's building up on land right now. Now up to 6. Brimaz joins the board for Boswell.
And you get this feeling like if Andrew misses a threat, if he draws one land at some point here, that's going to be game. But if he can keep putting threats onto the table that Jake has to respond to and doesn't get a chance to revelate or has to revelate for much less, then Andrew's still got a shot.
Yeah, well, Jake's hand is 2 Revelations and a Azorius Charm right now. So we see Jace drawing cards, just looking for lands and answers. We see Jace flips over 3 lands. It's a Temple and 2 basics.
And this is just going to be whichever pile has 2 cards in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I'm Jake, I actually think I got the choice pile here by taking the basics. Basics almost seem better than a Temple when you have a double Revelation hand.
Well, I think this may be better for Jake here. It sets the path for him to be able to red for 4, red for 5 if he's feeling so inclined.
Right. So depending on the attack here, Jake not even having to revelate yet. He can Mutavault block the 1/1. He can while Azorius charming the Brimaz.
And that's the breathing space he needs, because then the next turn, Brimaz gets cast as Summoning Sick. Then you fire off the big Revelation. Presumably what you find answers the Brimaz or the Ajani. I mean, you really only need to answer one or the other.
Well, this is the hard spot for playing against blue-red control, right? Andrew's using all his resources to try to get Jace off the table, only to know and realize the fact that this fight was never over Jace in the first place. It was just about time.
Yeah. I mean, Jace would have played a huge role if Andrew had allowed him to. Andrew did what he could by fighting over the Jace, but I mean, Jake got down to 12 very early on in the game, and he has not been touched since.
Yeah, and you can see it. Andrew knowing the situation he's in. He's going to start out by putting a counter on the Brimaz. That puts him up to a 5/6. And he's going to go to attacks, getting a Brimaz token.
It's a cat party.
Yep, it's a Johnny and Brimaz. You know, they hang out. I believe Johnny and Brimaz, yeah, they hang out in the storyline.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Makes sense, I guess.
Johnny briefly, yeah. Apparently, I was reading about the story. On the plane of Theros, like the Leonin were kind of like the old guard of the plane. They used to be like the dominant race on the plane, but now they aren't, and they're kind of off in the backwater, and Johnny hangs out with them.
Yeah.
And he helps Elspeth a bit in the storyline at some point.
So Jake here not even going to bother to fight over this Brimaz, just wants to get this big Revelation going.
Gets a Giant Sphinx's Revelation, finds his own copy of Brimaz here.
And now we'll see if Jake starts trying to stabilize the board with his own copy of Brimaz. It's a little tough against this Ajani, but he can start attacking pretty soon, I feel like, into this Planeswalker.
Mm-hmm. With so many cards, it's going to be difficult for him not to have a lot of answers. We see multiple Azorius Charms in Gans's hand. A Brimaz, another Revelation, which we already knew about.
Yeah, Jake is in kind of the don't screw this up territory right now.
Exactly. And it looks like the play is going to be his own Brimaz. So one on each side.
And now this may be the turn where Jake gets paid off with his incredible patience with this Azorius Charm.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been clutching on that thing for a long time.
And we'll see, he has 2 of them right now. And yeah, he's just buying more time and more time. Yeah, I'm looking at Boswell's side. I'm not sure what card combination Boswell's looking for anymore.
I think that he wouldn't mind starting this turn with Voice of Resurgence just to see what's going on Jake's side here. He doesn't even have anything like Mistcutter Hydra in the sideboard, and even if he did, it wouldn't be very high impact in the face of this Bramaz anymore, and all the red answers that Jake has access to as well.
All right. One Bramaz is going to swing in. The other Bramaz is going to block. And Azorius Charm does happen to Boswell's Bramaz.
So that's an enormous swing, obviously.
Yep.
Clearing out all the tokens here. Now Ajani down to 2 loyalty. Facing down a Bramaz and a Mutavault. This is rough times.
Right, we see an 8th card there for Gans.
Jake still has to respect the possibility of Advent of the Worm. It's not really clear he can fight over it. I don't know if he really has any counterspells in this deck, but it should be something on his radar.
Yeah, he has one Azorius Charm left, so he'll probably hang on to that one just to respect Advent. And Advent is made here, as you said. We do have immediately, you see Gans shuffles another Charm to the front of his hand at the ready. But that will save the Ajani at least for a turn.
At least for one turn. But Jake's light total is very high, and Andrew doesn't have much of a board besides, but...
Yeah, I mean, all these plays just come down to being 1-for-1s.
Yeah.
And one person's casting Sphinx's Revelation in between the 1-for-1s, while the other person is not.
And there's the Azorius Charm you alluded to.
Azorius, so that he actually let the Ajani go there.
Yep. I mean,
just trying to kill Bramaz.
The Ajani's not providing a lot there, and it looks like there's a second copy in Andrew's hand as well.
All right, Keranos played for Gans. That looks like going to be the way he wants to try to close out the game. So see that? It's that first ability. Every draw, Gans will reveal the top card. If it's a land, he draws it. If it's not a land, he gets a lightning bolt.
Yeah.
All right, so free card, and then he draws for turn.
I mean, at this point, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be. It certainly doesn't have to be Keranos.
It could be nothing. It could. It could be another land.
Nothing is also fine here.
That's my favorite win con, is to draw the nothing. Just You see Ajani there, putting a counter back on Bramaz. But no possible attacks, and Revelation for 6. That'll get the concession. So at 9-1, Jake Gans moves into the top 8 here in Somerset, defeating Andrew Boswell's green-white deck 2-1.
Andrew Boswell, I like your deck. I like the run you had. I like your haircut. I like the fact that you conceded to the second Revelation for 6. I don't know if I've ever met you, but I'm a big fan of your style in every facet of the game thus far. Good run in this tournament, obviously. He played very well on camera, but I think that matchup post-board is a little bit on the rough side, and Jake with the mixture of removal and sweepers and being able to impact the board quickly.